Hey everybody, and welcome back to Untangling Climate Finance. I'm Jay Tipton with Gordian Strategies. Today we'll be exploring one of the essential tools for financing the climate transition, carbon markets, and specifically the effort to build a verified, global, high-integrity carbon market capable of operating at scale. My guest today is Madeleine Carnemark, the director of the VCM Coalition, Carbon Policy and Markets Initiative at the High Tide Foundation. The VCM Coalition is working across stakeholders to strengthen market rules, improve transparency, unlock corporate demand, and build durable trust in carbon markets. It's an ambitious effort, aiming to help steer more than $100 billion by 2035 into real, measurable impact. In this convo, Madeleine breaks down how carbon markets are evolving beyond the voluntary label and why integrity and scale must rise together. We also talk about trust, inclusion, and what it will take to build a market that genuinely delivers. This conversation is extra special to me because I had the privilege of working closely with Madeleine and the exceptional High Tide Foundation team earlier this year on the VCM Coalition roadmap. And I was fortunate to be in the room at New York Climate Week this year in September when the coalition launched. Watching the vision come to life and feeling the energy around it was incredibly exciting and a very real milestone for the carbon market community. But okay, let's get after it. Here's my combo with Madeleine Carnemark. Hi, Madeleine. Welcome to Untangling Climate Finance. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. We had rain this morning and now blue skies in Madrid. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Denver, where we are blessed with almost 300 days of sunshine per year, and today is no exception. We're having the best fall as we prep for ski season, so can't complain.
Oh, I love it. Have you gotten any snow yet, or is it still a little early?
No snow yet, but Colorado keeps you on your toes. So, it could be 70 degrees today and snowing tomorrow. That wouldn't be unheard of.
Yeah, isn't Denver famous for having 4 seasons in one day, basically?
Yeah, we get these crazy swings that essentially mean you never know what to put on in the morning this time of year, but it's fun. I think everyone's so excited living near the mountains if it does snow. So it would be a welcome surprise.
Yeah. And as you said, 300 days of sun. If it does snow and you've got sun, everybody's happy.
Exactly.
Love it. I'm glad you're enjoying the autumn season. I am as well here. It's a little bit of rain, a little bit of sun, but the perfect autumn temp. So, okay. Anyways, enough of the weather, even though we are talking about climate finance. So climate is important. Why don't you kick us off by just telling me your name, where you work, and your title? Obviously, I know all of these things, but the listeners do not yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. I am Madeleine Carnemark, and I am the director of the VCM Coalition at the Carbon Policy and Markets Initiative, which is part of the High Tide Foundation. That's a real mouthful, but I've been really blessed to be able to be working with this team at the Carbon Policy and Markets Initiative for the past year in developing sort of the concepts around the VCM Coalition. And we officially launched last month at Climate Week. So I've taken on the helm as director, which has been really exciting.
Yes, very exciting. That was a huge announcement. I know that you guys were operating for quite a bit in stealth mode. So for you to actually go public with it, especially at New York Climate Week, which of course is a exciting, fun week, probably a nice moment for you for that to go out to the world. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And now it's been so exciting to hear the way it's been positively received, just even at the event. All we really wanted to hear was, we're excited for the future, but what we really were hearing from folks is, put me to work. What can we do? And as a coalition leader, that is the best thing you can hear. So it's been great.
Without a doubt. So why don't you tell us, what is the VCM Coalition and its focus areas?
Absolutely. So the VCM Coalition is this newly launched global initiative that's working to build what we call the next generation verified carbon market. Our mission is to make carbon markets deliver on their potential, which includes significant mobilization of capital towards high integrity mitigation and additional core benefits such as community development, nature conservation, and technological innovation. So the coalition is made up of more than 70 organizations and growing. We get interest in joining the coalition every day, which is exciting. And these include standard setters, NGOs, investors, buyers, project developers, and more that are all aligned on a shared vision of what the market can and should be. So while the coalition is new, the concept of reforming the market is not. And I think that's super important for us to start with, which is, in fact, so much of what the coalition is built on is this shared understanding that reform is already happening today, but it's happening in silos. It's often under-resourced, and it needs central coordination to move in alignment towards a shared goal. So the coalition is not starting from scratch. We are strengthening the reforms that are underway, identifying the remaining gaps, and accelerating new solutions to address those gaps because we believe in what this market can do and where it's going. Our goal is to build a market that is both scaled enough to matter and high integrity enough to trust. So to make this more real, and I think, Jay, you know a lot of this because GKS is part of the coalition and has been so fundamental in helping us design and think through the best way to do this. But what we've been doing is bringing market stakeholders together under a shared vision for that next generation market. And we organized ourselves around what good looks like across 5 pillars, which include high integrity science, robust oversight, trusted communications, targeted finance, and scaled demand. Together, these make up the scaffolding of what we see as a credible, investable carbon market. So we know where we need to go, and now the coalition's work is about building the tools and partnerships to get us there.
And we can circle back to those 5 areas in a little bit. But one, I just wanted to say that I love the overall direction because, as you had said, this isn't starting from scratch. It is activity that has been happening around the market, as you had pointed out, very siloed. And what was needed was a central figure to push it ahead because there has been great work that's happened in those areas, but just happening in this corner of the world or happening in this corner of the world and without any sort of like lassoing. And so I think that that's the biggest key here. You're well aware of that, but it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah. And I think just to really double down on that point, it's not just that we want to say it's happening. It's that this isn't a new concept. We've recognized that the market of the future, there's a lot that we need to do to build it up. And so that's why I think we saw that excitement at Climate Week, that we sort of now have the permission to say out loud, we're doing this and we're doing it in coordination with each other.
Right. I would imagine that you heard that quite a bit from some of the stakeholders that were just like, thank you, please do this. We need someone to push this forward. Let's go.
Yeah, working in the nonprofit space for a long time and sort of across all of these impact efforts, often you don't hear people want to be like, oh, another initiative. But in this case, I think it really is that this central coordination because the market is just so disparate today. And so bringing it all together has been exciting. And I think that sense of community, that there's people who really believe in the potential of this market to deliver for both the environment and for people has been really powerful.
So obviously, the VCM Plus Coalition is deliberately moving away from the term voluntary carbon market to verified carbon market, which is in the name.
Yes.
What is the significance of that shift?
Yeah, so the verified carbon market, when we say VCM Plus, we are indicating that this is the verified carbon market, and it refers to the entire ecosystem of carbon markets, so both voluntary and compliance. It's not a one-to-one substitution with voluntary. It's really recognizing that this market needs to be built and the solutions for integrity need to be built for the entire system. So we believe that as countries are establishing systems to implement Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and as the voluntary carbon market is expanding, the next 5 years represent a really pivotal opportunity to build internationally aligned systems, infrastructure, and rules that ensure transparency, credibility, and accessibility across both compliance and voluntary markets. So the coalition is building the foundation for everything, and that's why we call ourselves the VCM Plus.
Well, back that because I've always thought that we needed a bit of a PR shift in terms of voluntary. Never seemed to me to be the correct word because although companies are voluntarily getting involved, it just doesn't do the market the justice that I think it deserves.
Yeah. And honestly, this was a bit of a push and a pull because as we think about it, we see a lot of siloing in carbon markets that I believe is holding the whole system back. So as we look to the future, whether this is voluntary versus compliance markets or nature versus technology or reductions versus removals, this existing paradigm of pitting market segments against each other is only holding back the high integrity reforms the whole space needs.
Yeah.
And so when we think about taking this collaborative approach, it was really intentional for the coalition to design solutions and say, we're not just serving part of this market, we're serving the entirety of this market. And we're thinking about a foundation that works for everyone. So that's sort of like the push. But from a pull perspective, I also think this name is just speaking to the natural evolution and a reflection of where the markets are already converging. Many voluntary standards are informing the emerging regulations, and governments are incorporating voluntary credits into compliance systems. And when we talk to buyers, they don't care whether or not they're buying through a compliance market or because of a voluntary system. They care about the integrity of the credits.
Yeah.
And that's across the board.
Yeah.
And finally, I think, a lot of these countries, as they're looking to achieve their national commitments under Paris Agreement, are turning to private finance. And so the name isn't just about the PR of moving away from voluntary. It's also a signal of where the market's going and sort of the future and reality that we're living in.
Right on the money. I'm curious. High Tide Foundation has been very involved in carbon markets for a while, and you also. So it's like, what was the inspiration behind the VCM Plus Coalition to take on the challenge, and it is a challenge, of helping reshape the markets under this new verified banner? I know that you said, of course, people operating their own lanes and the need for maybe a centralized group to push it forward. But I would like to hear about the inspiration for it, because it just seems like it's very powerful.
I think that there's probably a couple things that came together. One is we've held a couple of these, what we called the Boulder convening for those who are part of it. I think those that were there, but we've held these 2 convenings in Boulder, Colorado, where we brought together market actors, recognizing that there were real challenges in the market. And the first one, I think what we heard from folks was it just felt so good to be with fellow people working in this market who believe in the potential. And so that's sort of that community aspect that is so important as we continue to do this hard work.
Yeah.
But at the second convening, we got a lot more tactical and we started thinking about, okay, what are the reforms that are necessary? And what we found is that people who were spending all their time thinking about carbon markets, we're still surprised to hear about what type of reforms are happening in other parts of the market, and that this siloing of all these different components meant that we weren't working as efficiently or as in a coordinated way towards the shared future. And so I think that really gave us permission for 2 things. One, that there was a call for that coordination vehicle, but 2, that people were really looking to get serious about how to do this reform and how to prioritize what was most necessary for the future of the market. Alexia Kelly, my boss at Carbon Policy and Markets Initiative, has played this unofficial coordinator role for a long time and has brought people together because of the passion High Tide Foundation has for the markets. And it was time to just really formalize that role. So while we are sort of leading the charge and doing this organization, the coalition is about the members. It is the vision of everyone who is a part of it, and the work will be done by the members for the future of the market. This isn't something where we're trying to develop, new solutions or compete in the space. We're trying to get the right funding to the right people who are delivering on the promise of this market.
And a beautiful little transition into my next question, which is that obviously you've set ambitious goals, one of which is mobilizing $100 billion and 5 billion tons of climate impact by 2035. So my question is, how does the coalition plan to operationalize such scale, but while maintaining what you pointed on earlier, which is super, super important, is the integrity and trust?
That is a great question and one we get asked a lot, but I'm going to be a little difficult and maybe actually flip it a bit. So instead of asking how do we scale while maintaining integrity, I think the real question is, can we have a high integrity market without scale? Because I think this is a big challenge of what we've come up against. At the heart of it, so many of the challenges around integrity and trust come down to risk. And risk is an inherent part of this market. And I think the more honest and transparent we are about that, the better equipped we are to manage it. And the way we look at it is that there's really 2 ways of managing that risk. We can reduce it, and that's really important for certain types of risk. We have to get it right. But then we can also create a market that can better absorb risk and withstand some of these changes that are just going to be inherent to any type of market. So on the reduction side, where we recognize that we really need the fundamentals and there's great work already underway, we need these clear and consistent methodologies that hold an incredibly high bar for what we define as entry into the market. This represents the work of the ICVCM in developing and reviewing all of these methodologies to ensure that they're delivering real climate impact and they're supporting local communities, nature, and technology. We need standardized contracts. We need to infuse the system with this early stage finance. We need to have better dialogue with communities and think about what benefit sharing agreements look like in projects that aren't led by the communities themselves. And we really need to think about continuing on this scientific research agenda so that our methodologies reflect the most up-to-date science. That's all critical in reducing risk and is critical entry into what we're thinking is the verified carbon market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think all those things both help scale, but they also benefit from scale because as the market grows, so do the resources and those feedback loops to improve quality. But then there's the absorption side. And I think this is the part where, critics of the market don't necessarily see that the market of the past just didn't have the type of market infrastructure that's necessary to sort of withstand any type of volatility. And so that's what we really want to work on and where scale really matters because we need infrastructure that allows for transparency and investment. And that looks like standardized data systems, interoperable registries, clear legal and financial frameworks. Those create a market that can attract institutional investors, sustain liquidity, and deliver transparency, which I think in turn reinforces that integrity. So in short, I don't see these two things at odds with one another, but rather they really depend on each other. I don't think we'll scale without integrity. That is the first bar to sort of build what we're calling the verified market, but we also won't have that integrity without the scale.
Exactly. To go a little bit further in the point of trust is that we know that obviously the market itself's reputation has taken a couple hits in recent years and rightfully so in a couple different circumstances.
Yeah.
So from your perspective and probably very much linked to what you just said, what do you think is needed to rebuild both public and investor confidence in the integrity of carbon credits and the market at large?
Yes, absolutely. And a good question. It often gets lost in the noise of the criticism, but the truth is the market that's being attacked is largely the market of the past.
Yeah.
And I wish more people would talk about that.
Yeah.
Because most people working in the space today, real advocates of the markets, would agree that many parts of that early market were flawed. And many of the criticisms we continue to hear about past projects are valid. And it's important as we work towards transparency and reform that we acknowledge that. I think we can both agree on that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, those critiques are largely outdated when it comes to where the market is now, and especially where it's going. For most of the last 2 decades, and I don't mean to diminish at all the important work that people have put into this market, but we really didn't have a fully formed, quote unquote, market even. What we had was a series of disconnected systems and one-off deals that lacked that kind of shared infrastructure, governance, and standards that you need for integrity at scale. And what I find inspiring is that despite that, even in that early fragmented stage, this market still managed to deliver a lot of meaningful climate impact. Were there projects that fell short? I think absolutely. But that's not a reason to abandon the mechanism altogether, especially in what the IPCC is calling, the decisive decade for climate action.
Yeah.
I think we need to be taking this yes and approach and not be throwing out good tools. Our team often says carbon markets aren't the worst. They just went first. And they've been a real testing ground for what climate finance can do. I see that as something worth investing in. So to actually get to your question, how do we rebuild the trust? First, I think with honesty and transparency, we have to own what hasn't worked. And I think what we see right now is a lot of distancing from that isn't working. But we also need to get much better at communicating what is working and what progress has been being made, because so much of it, I think you said this earlier, happens in stealth mode where people don't see that this is actually already underway.
Yeah.
But the second one, and this is what I feel so passionate about, we need collaboration, and that's what the coalition is all about, is removing this fragmentations. Because from my point of view, one of the biggest risks I see to the market today isn't actually the public criticism or the anti-market folks. it's the infighting within our own community. When we spend all our energy distancing ourselves from valid criticism or dividing market segments into good and bad, we're just reinforcing the narrative that the market is broken. So at the VCM Plus Coalition, we're really trying to change that by bringing everyone together around this shared vision, one that's grounded in science, integrity, transparency, and equity. And we're really taking this yes and mindset to everything in the market. Yes to the role of engineered solutions. Yes to the role of nature. Yes to reductions. Yes to removals. Yes to quality. And yes to scale. I think that's how we rebuild confidence, by showing that this market is capable of learning, evolving, and delivering real climate impact when we work together.
Mm-hmm. And working together is key, obviously, and that's central to what you're doing. And the changes in the market over the last 2 years alone, in terms of trending in the right direction, are pretty obvious for those of us that work in the market, which is great. And that is in large part due to some of the other integrity initiatives that are already active, such as the ICVCM, VCMI, and a few others.
Absolutely.
And so how is VCM Plus Coalition working alongside those groups to complement rather than compete in defining a credible market framework?
Yeah, that's important. It's a really important distinction. So the VCM Plus Coalition, one, isn't a standard setter. So much respect for the standard setters, but not sure I'm ready to take on that job. We're not writing new rules for what integrity looks like. Instead, we're the sort of the coordination vehicle that helps make the integrity standards being developed by groups like ICVCM and VCMI feasible in practice. So our goal isn't to compete with those initiatives, but really to connect them, to make sure all those pieces of the puzzle fit together. That means working closely with ICVCM and VCMI, who are both members of the coalition, but it also means working closely with the buyers and the project developers and the investors and the community advocates to ensure that the standards they're developing can actually be implemented on the ground at scale.
Yeah, that's great, because I think that, listeners might wonder, what is the interplay between ICBC and VCMI, et cetera, right? In terms of how does this piece together? So it's very critical for anybody who's tuning into this to understand that this isn't going to compete. Instead, it's going to complement all of the other work that's being done on both the supply side and the demand side.
Yeah. And I think just to reinforce that point, our whole goal is to reduce the duplication in the market. So we're not trying to do anything that others are doing. What we're trying to do is lift up the great reform that's happening, direct people to it, where we see duplicative efforts, bring those people into a room and say, how can we work together towards this shared solution? But also recognize there are still gaps in the market and there still is a lot of problem solving to do, and bring together the right folks who have been thinking about this to deliver on those solutions.
Yeah, exactly. But as you had said, and this is very key, is that there are people from these other integrity initiatives that are working with you. They're signed up on the coalition. So it's these lines of communication have already been established, and it just makes the entire process so much easier going forward if we're all moving in the same direction with communication of what is actually happening. And that's what you're providing.
Yeah. And I think, the communication is so critical. The coordination is so critical. But another piece of this that I think is really critical and important to this conversation is that so much of the reform that's necessary and the market growth that's necessary is going to require a real infusion of capital. And what we heard from people, this coalition is not just a communication vehicle, but what we heard from so many funders is, I just don't know where to be putting money in this really complicated space. There's so much criticism. There's so much sort of shadowing of doubt within the market. And I just need to know, where are these activities that are happening? Where can I drive the most impact? And so starting to map that out for people and show a signal to both the public and to the funding communities, hey, we're working together. This is coordinated. And here are opportunities to really invest in catalytic impact.
Yeah, that's such a key point, because as you know, a lot of investors and funders have their specific mandates of what they're looking to get invested in or to invest in. and to kind of have a little bit more clarity of the interplay between all of this, as opposed to saying you're just, gonna invest in demand because this is what you care about, or the justice part of it. Here's the whole picture and a little bit more obvious in terms of what's happening. That's just so fundamental, I think, for an investor to kind of wrap their brains around what's going on.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's good. I mean, obviously, one of your 5 pillars is that. So clarity there is great. Well, okay, we are getting towards the end of the interview. And this last question is, of course, as integrity standards rise, is that there's a risk of leaving behind smaller project developers or communities with less sophistication or market expertise to navigate these more stringent integrity standards. So obviously it's good because on one hand, integrity is going higher, but on the other end, it does require that you have a bit of an understanding to navigate this. So newer market entrants or smaller developers or communities with less experience have a risk of being left behind. And so I'm curious if the VCM Plus Coalition is doing anything to address that equity dimension of market access and participation.
Yeah, that's an important question. And I think it's something we're taking really seriously. As integrity standards rise, we can't let that create new barriers for those smaller developers or really for the local communities. So equity and access are front and center in our work. I think for those that were at New York Climate Week, we went through our principles. And one of them, as we think about design, has to be that equity comes first. So the ways that we're looking to address this is really, we're focused on shared learning and communication. So helping developers understand what these evolving integrity standards mean in practice and how to design their projects to meet them over time. They might not be able to meet that high bar right away, but how do we build learnings from the past so that we're building towards that? And that means early technical assistance, capacity building, and making sure developers have the right data and tools from day one. I also think this comes back to that tension of scale and integrity, right? When we have better scale, when we have better economies of scale on better systems, we're going to have better access to data, more easily accessible MRV and understanding. And so that's going to reduce some of those costs and help developers enter the market.
Yeah.
But second, we're looking at the policy and financing environment because even the best projects can't succeed if the enabling conditions aren't there. And we need supportive national policies, predictable permitting, funding mechanisms that reduce that upfront risk. And so a big part of our work is that carbon finance pillar, which is all about those like risk reduction strategies for that early stage finance. And finally, I think this one is really important. And again, kind of comes back to the work that we're doing in the corporate space, but we need to bridge the gap between buyers and project developers to improve transparency about what buyers are really looking for and creating the partnerships that can help projects deliver that. So we see these offtake agreements and advanced buyer commitments that are so important to helping folks get into the space, but we need that communication from buyers. So this is where that public-private collaboration is critical. Governments, philanthropies, investors each have a role to play to get this off the ground and meet that integrity bar over time.
Yeah, which is exactly why you all are obviously putting in effort to make sure that the buyers' voices are being heard to say, this is what we're looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Okay, so there's a lot going on. You guys just launched. That was end of September. It's hard to believe that, we're already November 5th and Climate Week was like a month and a half ago, and now we're getting ramped up for COP. But anyways, all that to say, you have your focus areas. There's a lot of work to do. There's 2 months left of 2025, and then we're into 2026. So what does the near future look like for VCM Plus Coalition? And also, how can other groups get involved? Because I want to give people a call to action in terms of next steps if they listen to this podcast episode. We want to join.
Yes.
We want to get involved. So what are you doing in the future? And how can whoever's listening that isn't already a part of the coalition become part of the coalition?
I love that. So I wouldn't be a recovering management consultant if I didn't tell you the coalition's work is really broken up across 3 phases: discovery, activation, and delivery. So right now we're really in that discovery phase, which is all about listening and mapping the landscape. We're onboarding members, understanding what's already happening across the ecosystem, and identifying where those biggest gaps still are. We're working closely with funders to see where their priorities align with the market needs so we can make sure resources are directed towards the areas that matter most. Then that next step is activation. That's where we're going to start building clear work streams around what we call the VCM Plus roadmap. The roadmap is essentially our shared plan. This will be a publicly available plan. It outlines what we need to get done for the market to scale with integrity and how we can align our collective efforts towards that. And then we move into delivery, which is where everything becomes real. That's when we start executing against the roadmap, measuring results, and demonstrating the impact of this work in practice. We don't want this coalition to just be theoretical. We want to be able to really mark the milestones of the impact that we're driving and be able to learn from what is and is not working. Now, all this is to say there's a lot of great work that's already underway. So some of these efforts are already in the activation and delivery phase. So as this coalition structure builds out, we're making sure that progress keeps moving in parallel to ensure that efficiency and speed. For folks that want to get involved, we welcome you. Come to vcmcoalition.org. There's a way of contacting us there, and we would love to hear from you about how you want to drive the future of this market.
Yes, so there is a game plan and it is being put into action. So there are ways for people to get involved, which makes me very excited because I love it. I love when there's action items. I'm an action item type of person. So
we love it. We love it.
Yeah, we do love that. And as you had said, the coalition already in its short amount of time in the public space has gotten a lot of people who have signed up and raised their hand. And so I think there's obviously more space for additional groups or people that want to bring their expertise or bring their human resource to it.
Totally.
I will make sure that I include everything that you just said in the show notes. So listeners, you heard it here, how you can get involved. And if you need more details, find it in the show notes.
Yes, we would love it.
We love it. All right. So the last question, Madeleine, and I know you're going to give me a good answer to this already. It comes from Stoicism.
Ooh, I'm excited.
So Epictetus once said, "What concerns me is not the way things are, but the way people think things are." If we adapt this to climate finance, my question is, what do you think is one thing that must be done to change how people think about climate finance?
Oof, this is a good question. I was actually a philosophy major, so I love
What? Were you really?
I was, yeah. So I love breaking things down and going to first principles.
Oh my gosh.
And when it comes to carbon markets, I'm going to start with carbon markets and then talk about climate finance more generally. But when it comes to carbon markets, I think we need to allow ourselves to move away from the noise and simply ask ourselves, do we think it's a bad idea to invest in projects that deliver high integrity mitigation aligned to the best available science and research? If your answer to that is no, I honestly don't know how you found your way to this podcast, but, great.
Fair, very fair.
If your answer is yes, that it is a good idea, then I would ask you to ask yourself where your issue with carbon markets really is. If we can agree that investing is good, but our issue is that it can't be in place of internal decarbonization, then I challenge folks to spend some time testing that counterfactual, because today that promised internal decarbonization is just simply not happening. And while we wait around for it to happen, we are really missing out on critical mitigation opportunities. If it's that we believe that markets don't deliver real mitigation, I challenge you to go back and look at the reforms happening at the ICVCM, the high bar that the CCP labels have created for the market.
Mm-hmm.
Go look at the science and research agenda happening to TNC's Shift CM program.
Mm-hmm.
Go talk to project developers who are regularly telling me that they're going above and beyond what is being asked of them through standards to deliver the highest quality for the communities they're working in. And go talk to the digital MRV folks and learn about how much better our data collection and monitoring has gotten and what the results of that monitoring is showing.
Yeah.
We need transparency, and I want people to look into it because the great work of the market is happening, and I think people need to give it a chance to show that it has listened to the criticism and is evolving.
Yeah.
Because simply making the claim that the market is bad, full stop, period, end of discussion, isn't getting us anywhere, and it certainly isn't helping in the climate crisis.
Yeah.
And then I would say we want to open that dialogue, and if you have concerns, let the market talk to you and address each of those and tell you about what it's doing. And then when it comes to climate finance more broadly, outside of just the market, I really hope that we can stop seeing climate finance as charity and start seeing it as infrastructure. We're investing in systems that make life possible. And financing climate solutions isn't a feel-good exercise. It's a fundamental investment in our shared future, and we need to build the systems that reflect that.
Your philosophy professors would be very proud of that response because you like flipped it and then you gave a challenge. And I feel like that's what a Stoic would do, right? They're like, why don't I challenge you to go out and think more deeply about this by having conversations with people in the market? So A+.
I would get in trouble if I didn't mention that my mother does send me a daily Stoicism email every morning. So shout out to mom.
Shout out to mom for the daily Stoic email. That's so good. And I think that was awesome. What a great way to wrap it up and to send people to challenge themselves a little bit, because I think you're right. Go have some conversations and see how improved DMRV is today versus 3 years ago. I mean, I think you and I are so in the weeds with all of it that it just kind of is like secondhand nature for us when we read that, for example, a DMRV company can now know exactly how much carbon is in a tree from a satellite that's orbiting planet Earth. But like a lot of people don't really know that. So it's just kind of like get curious and go out there and see for yourself how much has been done and the direction that we're moving in. And I think it could definitely change some opinions.
Absolutely. And like, we are not here, even at the named VCM Plus Coalition, we are not here fighting for market's sake. This type of investment is so important. That type of research, our understanding of what is driving real impact in the world is important. And if markets are a way of delivering the finance necessary to do that work, that's great.
Yeah.
And I just want to focus on that impact more than the mechanism itself.
Yeah. Yep. I agree 100%.
Well, this is so fun.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I appreciate you taking some time out of your blue sky Wednesday in Denver to have a little conversation with me. This was great. What you guys are doing is super essential. And I look forward to the next couple months and then the first part of next year to just have all of these releases of what we have to do coming from you guys.
Yeah, that's some rest because 2026 is all about the work.
That's right. You're right. The second half of the critical decade begins.
Let's go.
Let's go, baby. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Talk soon.
Ciao. All right. That's it for today's episode. A massive thanks to Madeleine for joining and for helping us unpack what it will take to build a trusted, high-integrity carbon market, and why getting this right is essential to scaling real climate impact. If you're capable and interested, I encourage you to please get involved with the coalition by visiting VCMcoalition.org. You can also reach out directly to them at info@vcmcoalition.org. Both of those are linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow, rate, and share the show. Hitting the follow button really helps others find us. For more insights on carbon markets, climate finance, and impact investing, don't miss our weekly audio brief, Sliced, which is also in this same feed. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back again very soon with another episode of Untangling Climate Finance. This podcast is brought to you by Gordian Strategies.